Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, the sound money blog of the 21st century, in which I write daily of my vision of the future of money, in which gold plays an increasingly passive role and Bitcoin is increasingly the center of the universe. Try a free 7-day trial membership and contact me anytime at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com to ask about the blog or arrange cryptocurrency and/or precious metal related consultations. In my one-on-one podcast series, I seek to learn of and share the viewpoints of the Bitcoin community's top thought leaders and entrepreneurs. All episodes can be found at CryptoGoldCentral.com, on my Twitter page at Andy_Hoffman_CG, and the World Crypto Network's YouTube channel and iTunes feed. This week's guest, in his second one-on-one appearance, would unquestionably be nominated for Best Bitcoin Tweeter if such an award existed, which in a space where nearly all relevant information is gleaned from Twitter is an immeasurably impressive accomplishment. That person who actually pulls off his handle of Satoshi is Ansel Lindner, who can be found on Twitter at Ansel Lindner. To that end, Ansel, welcome to One-on-One.
Thanks for having me, Andy. I don't know if I deserve all those accolades, but thanks for having me.
Oh, you do. In our community, people look for people who are supplying good information and have good insights. And I think I'm as good a judge of that with what all I've dealt with in the alternative media for years. And you are one of the handful of Twitter feeds where I consistently find good information. So I appreciate that. Now, for the second week in a row, the top story is the Bitcoin price. Only this time far more dramatically. As when I taped last week's episode with the Renegade Investor, the price was fighting to maintain $10,000. Last night when I scripted this, I had written it was $13,000, but since then it is now $16,500, bringing its market cap to $275 billion, which makes it larger than all but 10 publicly traded companies in the world. Not only that, but unlike last week, when the entire cryptocurrency sector rose, with Ethereum, for instance, briefly topping $500, nearly all altcoins, with very, very few exceptions, have been under pressure, some significantly so. Frankly, I think a major inflection point in monetary history occurred this week, as not only did the entire world realize Bitcoin must be owned, but that the rest of the crypto sector is under significant scrutiny to either prove they have use cases or be forever marginalized. To that end, Ansel, what big picture conclusions do you take from this week's historic price moves?
Well, it's taken me a while to get used to this 5-digit price. I think we had a while with Mt. Gox to get used to the 4-digit price, but I'm feeling a little bit dizzy, obviously, or honestly, about being up this high in the price. Is it real? We all knew we could get here one day, and it's been a long slog to get here. But yeah, we're going up, and I don't see any real resistance to the price with all the stuff happening. You've talked about what's going to happen in January 1st with the wall of institutional money coming in, all the good news. Yeah, it's looking very, very bullish, but I think we should prepare for some FUD. That would be, I think governments are going to be opening their eyes, since all the institutions and all the big money, they're opening their eyes to Bitcoin. The governments are going to provide a lot more regulatory guidance and things like that. So it's not clear sailing, or smooth sailing, but we will be going up for the foreseeable future, I think.
Right. Well, I think this is as close to clear sailing as you're going to get. It's certainly in my career in the markets, I've never seen anything like it. And it'll be, of course, yes, we can correct, but we were supposed to correct many times. And the fact is, I think what we're seeing here is the recognition that, as Max Kaiser put it, Bitcoin is the newest mega asset class and the first one that the world has seen in probably centuries. You know, I'm going to skip around here because what you brought up was the FUD, and it's been something I've been focusing on since I shouldn't say we got up here, but since we got to 10,000, saying what's next. And when I spoke to Edward last week, Renegade Investor, we talked about the coming collision between the legacy asset markets and cryptocurrency, i.e. the war between decentralized currencies, stores of value and governance, and centralized status quo assets and their leaders. My sense is that the tide is turning heavily in Bitcoin's favor before the war even starts, to the point that it's going to be difficult for governments, many of which will support Bitcoin's growth, to generate much of an offensive before ultimately surrendering to the reality of a decentralized new order. So do you believe, Ansel, that there will be a bloody battle royale on the horizon, or that governments will be forced to surrender peacefully?
I did tweet about this the other day that, you know, these individual politicians are going to be wanting to buy Bitcoin. And so will they vote to restrict Bitcoin? Probably not until they've accumulated some. So I think that we could see some hardcore regulation like KYC stuff, more tracking, more mandatory reporting and things like that. But as for like outright banning and being a bloody fight on Bitcoin, I don't think so, because the politicians, they want to get in as well. And we all know that the bankers write a lot of the regulation too. So they want to get in. They're not going to close the doors before they can get in. So we have a little bit of time, and it won't be too bloody, I think, in the grand scheme of things, because Bitcoin to me is like a peaceful revolution. Gold bugs, myself included, for a long time thought there was going to be like a Mad Max scenario, an Armageddon scenario, and we don't need that with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a peaceful revolution, and so that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, and there's so many buzzwords that came out of what you just said in my notes. You know, one of them being the game theory that's going on, and this is the kind of thing I've been talking about, especially in the last few weeks at the website, because there's, you know, everyone wants to believe that the governments are out to get Bitcoin, but it's just not true. I mean, arguably, the Chinese government aren't even out to get them, because for all their bluster, those exchanges are still open. And if they really want to be the true kings of the financial world, what are they going to do? You know, run away from the greatest monetary innovation in history when they could be printing yuan to buy it, which they probably are. And you know, Bitcoin being a hydra. I mean, you know, okay, so you ban something here, so people go to Japan where the government embraces it, or they'll go to the decentralized exchanges or the local bitcoins.com. So, you know, the way I see it, it's just going to be difficult for them to fight. And when you think in terms of, if the U.S. government is really the worst thing we're worried about, I mean, just how much damage can a small government in a world of 7.5 billion people do?
Yeah, well, I think they literally are out to get Bitcoin. They're out to accumulate it themselves, right? So
yes,
they they also, I think, now they've kind of realized this monetary aspect of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin brings so much more to the table. You know, it's not just a monetary revolution, but it's an economic revolution. And you say it's the Star Trek future. Is that you're saying? Yes. So yeah, that governments are just, and politicians too, they're just starting to grasp that the monetary aspect. Wait until they understand the social impacts of Bitcoin.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to this game theory, and basically everything about Bitcoin is game theory. That's what we've been talking about through the scaling debate all year. Every time there was a major issue, it's like, well, whose best interest would be to get the price down? And when it turned out, in the big picture, it's in no one's best interest. It's not in Roger Ver's best interest. It's not in miners' best interest. It's in everyone's best interest to get it up, no matter whether you're the U.S. government that hates Bitcoin. You realize you'd be crazy not to own it, and that's why I am sure that the Federal Reserve is buying. In fact, I've been writing recently how, and I remember this tweet, it was like a week ago. I said one of the memes next year will be that central banks will be printing money to buy Bitcoin. Actually, Adam Meister said it a while ago, but you know, I'll give him credit, but it makes all the sense in the world. And you know, which governments are going to say it first?
Is that a question to me? Which governments are going to come out first?
Yeah. Who's gonna be? I mean, is the Japanese? They're embracing it. Are they going to say it? Are the Swiss going to say it because they're the smartest monetary people in history? Who's going to say it first?
Yeah, I think the Japanese are very friendly to this, and I've been talking about the Japanese for over a year, that they are going to the population is going to wholeheartedly embrace Bitcoin. The Swiss is a good option as well for being the first to do that. But you know, we've heard these things in the past, like the Central Bank of Barbados in the past has released papers and studies saying that they could consider using Bitcoin as a reserve. But yeah, I totally agree with you. That's going to be coming out very shortly. Other sanctioned countries as well, like Russia or Iran, even North Korea. I saw a funny meme today about Kim Jong-un was sitting there cheering and the price of Bitcoin was skyrocketing. So, yeah, all these sanctioned countries are going to, they might be the first ones. And well, that could play into like a negative narrative for people to say that Bitcoin is used by criminals and bad regimes and things, but really it's sound money, and these bad regimes are sanctioned, so they're going to do the best they can in this world and use a form of money that cannot be censored.
Right, but the point is the price will be going up. So this is the weakness. The weakness of the powers that be. You can't, if you keep disparaging something and it keeps going up, the world is voting against what you're saying. And if they say that it's for criminals and for Iranian terrorists and the price keeps going up, it's saying that the world thinks that this is a good thing, and that the United States or whoever is saying this has no credibility. That's the game theory thing. You know, we talk about Japan. I mean, how many years have I been commentating about precious metals and talking about how Japan is going to collapse? I call it the land of the setting sun. They have everything going against them. Everything they once did right, they've done more than wrong. They have the most debt, the most money printing, negative interest rates. They have their Fukushima. They got, I mean, literally, there's not a single thing going for them. And then just like they did after World War II, they found a way. And this way is, guess what? They embraced Bitcoin. And you can bet your anything that the Japanese central bank is buying it, the Bank of Japan. And who knows, you know, as I said, this will make or break governments. So if the United States wants to break themselves by fighting the primary trend, while Japan or Iran wants to, you know, take the tailwind, we're going to see big changes in the political order. I assume that's the kind of things you're talking about.
Oh, yes, the geopolitical order for sure. And, you know, that's based on the petrodollar and all these things. So there's going to be massive shakeups, and what is the world going to look like in 10 years? There will be different borders. I'm sure of that.
And yeah, and I suspect that Bitcoin will have a big part in saying, I mean, you know, there's a look. Again, when you have people talking about this is a bubble, and I was writing about this yesterday. In fact, I wrote, it was last night, I said, no bubble has ever grown this big. That was last night. That was when we were at a $230 billion market cap. Now we're at $275 billion. I'm not talking about entire markets. I'm talking about this is one asset. And if you look at the other, quote, you know, stocks or a lot of these bond markets that are this big, they are here to stay. They are big, big, big entities. So clearly the world, the people that are buying Bitcoin right now is the big money that is anticipating dramatic changes, as you say, socially, politically, geopolitically. This is far from an asset bull market. This is a paradigm change, which none of us have ever seen before.
Yeah, the real bubble is when you look at central banks' balance sheets, right? It looks exactly like the Bitcoin chart. It just goes up like this. And so if they're going to call Bitcoin a bubble, they need to look at their own balance sheet, because they've been printing money and interest rates have been at basically zero for, what, 7 years? So, yeah, the people are ready for Bitcoin.
Still negative in Europe and Japan. Yeah. And that's the beauty, you know, because people talk about a bubble and they just don't understand the scarcity factor. It's one thing to call a stock that has unlimited share issuance a bubble, but Bitcoin is $16,000 because there's only, I don't even use 21 million. There's a lot lost. There's a lot that hasn't been mined yet. The number is somewhere between 10 and 15 million. That's like a micro cap stock having that kind of share float out there. So being $16,000 is not that much money, because if we get to, you're talking about the bubble, when you talk about the global stock markets are somewhere around $100 trillion, bonds are way more than 100 trillion, currencies are probably 100 trillion themselves, and Bitcoin and crypto, except Bitcoin is 2/3 of crypto, at least, is replacing it. It's not adding to it. So for Bitcoin, we're talking today, I was talking to someone at $60,000 or whatever, you know, you're at $1 trillion. $1 trillion is pennies on this legacy financial system. And when you look at what the assets are, fiat currencies, stocks and bonds that have been abused and monetized and are just completely, you know, anachronistic for what they do. And to say it's a bubble when even at $1 trillion, at $60,000 Bitcoin, it's really just a drop in the bucket compared to this dying legacy asset system that's held together by politicians who are all at each other's throats and are all probably competing to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's a good analogy might be it's more of a leak instead of a bubble. So Bitcoin is like slashing through the economy, and what's going to happen? All that money under pressure in the economy is going to ooze out of that slice that you just cut. So yeah, it's all this money is just going to come rushing into Bitcoin, and it's going to feel like the whole economy is just going like this. Even now, like I try to watch the mainstream media and the mainstream financial press, read some of their stuff, but it's just so boring these days compared to Bitcoin. I just cannot get worked up. Or, you know, coming from the gold bug world, I used to like get emotional when I would read articles about gold and silver, and maybe like this the Chinese market, the futures market that they opened up over there, and like I would be emotional. I'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. But now reading it, it's just
because well, at some point you're just so frustrated with the price being suppressed, you're just hoping that something will come along that shakes things up, and it never does. And now thank God I don't have to ever look at Zero Hedge again. I mean, I look at it a couple of times a day just to see if something dramatic happened. But, you know, the news is, you know, Congress fighting, everyone hates Trump, Harvey Weinstein, and, you know, a whole bunch of stuff. And we're talking about Bitcoin is not only the biggest revolution that we've ever seen, but it's also the most uncorrelated asset. It really could not care less if we have nuclear war in North Korea, if Trump is president, if there's a tax bill. It just doesn't care. And it makes you really be able to focus on productive things as opposed to unproductive things out there. So I'm going to take that onto the next question, which is as big of a picture question as you get. Now, the way I see it, several historic realizations about Bitcoin are encircling the globe as we speak, as violently and rapidly as ever before. The first, that Bitcoin has no competition in the crypto space and likely never will. Second, that no internal force can stop it, and likely no external force either. And third, that Bitcoin has, in just a few short years, completely usurped the storage of value leadership gold has held for 5,000 years. Ansel, do you agree with one or more of these thoughts? And if not, what else is there driving the price explosion?
I do agree with that. I mean, the only competition really is FUD, people scaring people about things, false narratives like the Bcash narrative. But yeah, eventually those will all just get consumed by Bitcoin, just like everything else. All the alts will be consumed by Bitcoin. All of the stock value, bonds, everything will be sucked into Bitcoin. And so, yeah, there really is no competition because it's all about incentives, right? Satoshi created this beautifully aligned incentive structure. And like you talk about game theory, it seems like everything was thought about, and every new situation that comes up, every new topic that people want to discuss, like I've seen kind of a growing movement talking about proof of work being wasteful. But when you break it down using, you know, a good understanding of economics, you can destroy that argument too. So Satoshi designed this great system with all these incentives aligned, and people are incentivized to get in, and that is all you can say. Store value wise for usurping gold, I agree with that. I've recently thought that, okay, so the gold window closed in what, 71? So when did computers start? We had the early internet, early DARPA stuff or whatever they were creating for NORAD in the 50s, 60s. And I don't think it's any coincidence really that gold was demonetized around the time that the internet came up, because you cannot send gold over the internet, and the internet made it, communications channels made it so that gold was centralized, and you had the counterparty risk. So I think gold has been losing its reserve currency, or its store value status for many decades. And Bitcoin, we've been waiting for something like Bitcoin, and now that it came out, it's only taken what, 8 years to get where we are here, 9 years.
Right.
And
well,
yeah.
Put it this way. This is the title of an article I wrote 2 days ago. As the digital future comes more quickly into focus, Bitcoin is, and this was what you were saying, sucking up every major asset class like a black hole, causing me to again rethink my gold thesis. So a bunch of things we just talked about are encompassed in that article, and it's exactly what it's doing. I'm not sure if Satoshi could have imagined the impact that this would have, but it really is, because again, people think, well, it's just competing against fiat currency. No, it's competing against everything. It's competing against stocks. Stocks and bonds better be fearful, because stocks and bonds are the tools of the 1%. The reason that we are in the mess we are globally, where you have this incredible wealth inequality and social unrest that created Bitcoin, is because of these vehicles: fiat currency, stocks, bonds, and the ability to manipulate them to the point where they no longer do what they were once created to do. Bitcoin, you can't change what it's created to do. It's a peer-to-peer system. Stocks can be manipulated. They can be leveraged. They can be all kinds of things that can take away from what they were supposed to do. And so I really think this whole decentralized revolution, in which Bitcoin is the anchor, is going to steal from them too. So we're talking about not just stealing from fiat currency, but from actual legacy asset classes. And as for gold, you're exactly right. I mean, look, for all the manipulation that's been going on, and no one's reported on it more than me. I mean, literally no one. The fact is that there's a reason why, with all that's happened in the world, that it just hasn't been able to break the cartel's grip. I mean, we've had massive silver shortages several times in the last 10 years, and still the price wouldn't go up against the price of gold at all, because they have been demonetized in the people's minds. They were still the best option in my mind for many years. That's why I held it, because I know this fiat system is doomed, but they're no longer the best option. I think silver is completely a base metal now, and gold has residual wealth value, as I call it, a call option on crisis. But the big money of the world, they want Bitcoin. They want digital assets, because it will be a Star Trek world. And that's why you're seeing this really unprecedented move in an asset class. I've never seen anything like that. I've seen individual stocks, but nothing like an asset class doing this. Now, back to
can I touch on something there?
You sure can. Go.
So yeah, the price is, you can compare those stocks and bonds to price, store value of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is also competing on like a consensus model. It's competing on a government model itself. So I think it's also going to suck that up. It's going to suck all of these things. The social order of the world gets sucked into Bitcoin. And what's an asset class that we haven't mentioned is lobbying. I consider that, because that's one of the best ROI is lobbying the government. So that's going to be sucked up by Bitcoin as well. I don't see, well, me being like an anarchist and being a gold bug, now Bitcoin bug, I don't see any negatives coming from Bitcoin whatsoever.
Yeah, and you don't have to be an anarchist. It's this, the revolution is decentralization. That's the killer app. The fact that it takes away the ability of a handful of people, whether on a local basis, a national basis, or the IMF, like big global basis, to have any impact, because people just don't care what they have to say. It's like these people say, well, they're going to create an SDR, and so I'm going, well, first of all, who's going to want a basket of crappy currencies that all crashed in response to them all crashing? But more importantly, when you're talking about Bitcoin, why even have a meeting? No one's going to transact with any of these big players. There's nothing they could say. And that's why with each passing day, I think even if you look back a year ago, you'd say, oh my God, at some point the US government, I mean, look what all their power, they're going to crack down on Bitcoin. And I'm thinking, well, look, first of all, the Chinese, quote, cracked down, didn't do anything. What is the US going to do? Close Coinbase? I mean, So that's exactly what you're saying. It's decentralization that takes away even the most powerful entities on the planet's ability to impact it. And that's why, you know, that's the hubris of someone like Roger Ver, because if the US government has no impact on Bitcoin, which they won't, can you imagine a single person, and not even like, you know, Bill Gates or someone like that, or Mark Zuckerberg, actually thinking that he can influence the course of Bitcoin's history? And you know, it's a lesson that he's going to think about for many decades. Now, back to the altcoin destruction. As the Bitcoin dominance index explodes more powerfully than at any time in its history, the question of what role altcoins will likely play comes into play. We all know Bitcoin can't do everything and likely shouldn't. That said, what can it do well that altcoins specifically or as a group can?
Well, altcoins have served as a test net for Bitcoin for a long time. Not only a technological test bed, but a meme test bed. So they, you know, you kind of filter which meme is going to attract which people. And also with more altcoins, you can have more memes out there and bring more money into the altcoins, which eventually gets back into Bitcoin, the reserve currency, the reserve cryptocurrency. So I think they serve that function. But I do think that we've kind of switched into a new era where it's not altcoin season. Altcoin season is not going to come back. It's going to be fork season. We're going to have all these forks, and they are just an iteration on memes to bring money into Bitcoin. It's very interesting to think about Bitcoin being alive and it throwing all these things out there like altcoins and now forks, and what can it do to suck more energy out of the legacy economy. And so that's what I kind of think altcoins and forks are doing. Okay,
so speculation. So my question is there, aside from just a blatant cash grab, taking advantage of the hotness of the sector, is there literally anything that, be cash, be diamond, be gold, super Bitcoin, lightning Bitcoin, or any of them, is there anything that any of those things could ever do that would be useful aside from Bitcoin?
Yes, I think some of them could morph into like side chains and things like that. So, you know, we have the RSK side chain that's going to be coming out. I don't know if they're calling themselves a side chain, but that's what they are. And these other forks could be side chains, especially if they have SegWit. They could do atomic swaps and in and out. There could be some utility, but no, I mean, maybe 1/100th of the utility that holding Bitcoin has for you. Right. And layer 2 could accomplish the same thing as well. So,
because what I think also I've said all along, look, everything changes in double dog years here, that it's kind of inconceivable to believe there'd be one currency. There's you know, 200 currencies in the world now, and the world functions. I mean, some of them are the Venezuelan bolivar, and all of them are at some rate causing inflation. But there's no way that I could see people in small island nations in the South Pacific using the same currency as people in Canada or Venezuela. So there's definitely going to be a need for things. And the question is, which we're going to learn, what? I mean, is anything on this list right now in the top 10 going to be something that's going to be a major winner over time? Do you think any of the top altcoins can be big winners over time?
I think there's like Monero and Litecoin. I think that they will last the test of time, at least somewhat. But no, out of the other ones, I don't think so. You bring up a good point, though, about like local currencies, regional currencies. And I think those will be centralized. There's no need for like a Midwest, like let's say there's some state token that's in the future. There's no need for that necessarily to be decentralized. So I think we'll see centralized local currencies, centralized regional currencies, but always with the opportunity to swap back into Bitcoin. As long as you have that base protocol of Bitcoin that's decentralized, you can build centralized applications on top of that, which would be these regional type currencies, I think. So going forward, that's probably it's a possibility that we see that.
What about something like, and I'm just thinking this now, like Amazon.com coin? Because obviously, look,
Yes.
let's face it, Amazon is going to be a lot bigger. I mean, they are going to be a lot bigger 10 years from now than they are now. And, I mean, well, they have something called Amazon coin, but I don't think that's what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, will countries and corporations and municipalities have their own tokens that are ultimately convertible freely to Bitcoin? Is that an option?
Oh, sure. We might not, you might be a citizen of an internet country, right? And so we don't know what's going to be in the future. And like the sovereign individual, I don't know if you've read that book, but there's going to be these people that are very powerful and on the internet. And I think that those people could morph. This is kind of getting a little bit farty, but they could morph into the new kings, the new monarchs of the future. These sovereign individuals, like a Roger Ver that has a lot of money and influence. He could have his own personal troll army, control narratives, and you could be under his protection, things like that. So I think that there will be maybe some currencies involved there. That's taking it in the deep end. But corporations, yeah, totally. They'll have their own currencies too. Just like they have their own airline miles today and their own Amazon rewards points, those will morph into a currency of the future for sure.
Yeah, well, look, if this revolution is decentralization, you're going to have the creation of decentralized powers. I mean, it's not going to be just a completely anonymous world where there's no one that has any power. And obviously, they used to say, he who has the gold wins. Well, certainly people who have the Bitcoin are going to be in positions to create new borders and create new power structures. And, like you said, this is just very way out there, but
yeah,
people need to understand we are talking about a world where you don't have central banks making monetary policy. And because governments won't be able to collect tax revenues when so much of the world's trade is in cryptocurrency, governments will get smaller. And someone's going to have to take up that vacuum, and we'll have to see, will it be people or new entities or what? But it's so exciting to know that banks will be dying.
Yeah, government is just an idea, right? It's just an idea, like Bitcoin is an idea, or that crazy idea that I just stated. So who knows what the future is going to bring? But it definitely is going to be decentralized, and Bitcoin is going to be at the center of it.
Yes. Well, that's certainly, again, people, when you see this kind of move up, it's for a reason. It's not a bubble. No bubble, the tulip bubble has never done anything like this. I'm not talking about price appreciation. I'm talking about the absolute value of the Bitcoin market cap is unbelievably huge. The amount of money that has gone into this. This is no bubble. This is a paradigm change. And we probably have never seen anything like it and never will again. So embrace it and learn as much as you can about it. Now, to that end, here's the next question, which some people want to know. Hopefully, you already have your position. But I'll tell you one thing. From my perspective at Crypto Gold Central, it is becoming extremely difficult for the average person to acquire Bitcoin in size. I have been working hard on finding alternative on-ramps, but global trading networks on both exchanges and over-the-counter are clearly operating at or close to capacity. I take that back. They are at capacity. Ansel, do you have any suggestions or insights on how investors could proceed in acquiring Bitcoin, and how do you anticipate this scenario of being able to, get through all the scarcity developing in the coming years?
Okay, so on my show, I've started quoting the Finney price, which I kind of came up with a few months ago, and it's 1/10,000th of a Bitcoin. And I think if we start talking in smaller decimals, maybe people will be willing to, cost dollar average in. I mean, people can still do that. Don't call me. I'm getting too many calls about selling Bitcoin, or where do I buy Bitcoin, and all this stuff. And it's funny, two and a half years ago at $200, I could not find anybody to do Bitcoin swaps with. Like, I wanted to be like this local Bitcoin seller, and nobody in my city here was buying Bitcoin at that time. But of course, now that it's going to 20,000, everybody wants to buy it. It's kind of funny. But yeah, I don't think very many people are going to own a lot of Bitcoin. look at the poverty rates or the, minimum wage that we have today. Most people aren't really, they don't have $500 to meet an unexpected expense. So those people aren't going to be buying Bitcoin, unfortunately. The people in Africa and the people in South America or Asia, some of the poverty-stricken places of the world, they're not going to be buying a lot of Bitcoin, but they can still benefit from the Bitcoin revolution. So Bitcoin is making the world more efficient place. It's creating a bunch of new value in the world, and all of the poor people that can't maybe afford to buy Bitcoin, they are going to benefit just like everybody else. So yeah, just because you can't buy Bitcoin doesn't mean you can't maybe study it, learn it, increase your skill set, get out there, and there's lots of opportunity that Bitcoin is creating in the world. So you could go that route as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I was referring specifically to how to buy it, but I think I know the answer. I'm sure you've seen, you know as much as I do. It's very hard to acquire right now, particularly in size. But I think you're onto something. I've talked in the past about stock splits in Bitcoin, and I think it's just going to be a matter of people getting used to the fact that it'll be traded in Satoshis or bits at some point, because right now it's Berkshire Hathaway stock. I mean, if you buy Berkshire Hathaway stock, you buy like one share if you're lucky. And it's going to be like that one day. So there is a mad scramble today to get it before that gets there. And, I and Ansel and pretty much everyone in our world is seeking the best ways to do it. But when you look today, I looked earlier this morning, and Bitfinex was at 14,900. Coinbase was at 16,100. And in Korea at Bithumb, which is the most active exchange in the world, it was 18,100. This was a few hours ago. So the point is that, anyone that does have anything for sale is jacking up the prices, and you're really just going to have to be as creative as possible right now, because this is the time to get what you can, because one day soon we'll have to be trading in bytes or Satoshis, because that's going to be, like you said, no one's going to be able to own a lot of Bitcoin. Now, finally, I want to ask you something that could enhance the education process of our listeners dramatically, which is, how do you go about seeking and disseminating quality information on Twitter? Quite obviously, this is the dominant form of Bitcoin-related information flow for now, at least. And in my view, you are one of its most valuable contributors. What are you looking for? Who are you looking for out there?
Are you looking for like individual recommendations of who to follow?
I'm looking for anything, and for myself too, because it is amazing. It is a wealth. I remember when I was in the precious metal sector, just talking about how much I hated Twitter, like it was a blight on the world. And once I got here, I realized it's the most amazing invention, communication-wise, I've ever come across.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin Twitter will be overrun by these people, these trolls that are out there. If you see some big posts about Bitcoin mining being wasteful recently, like I mentioned earlier, there's thousands of retweets on this on certain tweets with lots of trolling going on in the comments or the replies. So I think those trolls will come. I mute a lot of people, and I am blocked by a lot of people. But I don't know. I think that I follow mainly sound money people that have found Bitcoin, and people that are looking into how Bitcoin is going to change the social aspects of the world. Because, I mean, I found gold originally because I thought that it was going to bring a sound, maybe ethics back to the economy and back to government and all these things. And I think Bitcoin is going that same way. So deep down, I'm more like interested in the social economic stuff going on. And so that's what I follow on Twitter. I don't know what else I can say about Twitter.
No, that's very valuable information, because you have to seek things out. And actually, what you say about it being overrun by trolls is extremely, I can relate to it, because I remember back, I mean, for years, let's talk 2002 to 2008, my whole portfolio was mining stocks, primarily small ones, but all of them. And at the time, Yahoo Finance chat rooms were the kings of where you get information. That and Stockhouse, which by the way was owned by Jeff Berwick. And both of these forums were absolutely decimated by trolls. By the time we got to maybe 2006 or 7, literally every other comment was political or attacking Jews. And it was to the point where there was nothing left about the actual company. So I can see that that is a possibility. But right now, there's enough good, smart people that it works. And I look forward to what platforms are going to change the world. Maybe it's Steemit or maybe something else. But there's going to be new decentralized forums. And right now, to the listeners, I'll just say that if you're looking for a base for people that can help you to find other good people, I hope you go to my Twitter handle and certainly go to Ansel's at Ansel Lindner. Anyway, do you have any more final comments you want to give before we move to the end?
Well, people need to look at who's been right and wrong over the last year or two in this big debate that we've had with scaling Bitcoin. And if you can, if somebody has been wrong time and time again, and now they're telling you to buy Bcash, they're not the people to follow. So follow the people, and look at how their predictions have turned out in the past and what they're saying now. It's a really big red flag for me when you can just sense when people are trying to instill fear. And there's no coincidence that's called fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You can feel that these people are trying to instill this feeling of fear and uncertainty into their followers to get them to do what they want. So steer clear of those people that are negative and go towards the positive people that have been right multiple times over the last couple of years. That's my kind of advice.
Yeah, well, that is very sound advice. And particularly now, I think the way to emphasize it is we have to realize that this big change, this inflectionary point, I mean, whether you've been in the Bitcoin sector for 3 months or 3 years or longer, not many have done that. It's right now that matters. This is where fortunes, starting in the past, I don't know, a week, month, 2, maybe a month or 2 tops. This is where fortunes are being made and lost for the future. This is when we talk about the great wealth transfer, which we'd always hoped gold would do, but clearly it's going to be Bitcoin that's doing it. This is what's happening right now. So fortunately, a lot of that FUD isn't as powerful as it used to be, but there's plenty of opportunity to make wrong decisions. For instance, buying Bcash, because trust me, anyone owning Bcash today is praying. They're either selling or praying because they realize that the big money does not care at all about things without use cases. So anyway, with that, we're going to conclude today's podcast featuring one of the Bitcoin communities, and I wrote communists. I meant to say communities, most active, prolific, and informative tweeters and commentators, Ansel Lindner. Follow him at Ansel Lindner. And also, what is your show that you do?
I do a podcast called Bitcoin and Markets. You can find it on SoundCloud, iTunes. I just started doing it on YouTube as well. I'm going to get that going. So yeah, do it every couple days, every 3 days maybe. I give an update and I concentrate on fundamentals, talking about hash rate, price ratios in Bitcoin and altcoins and stuff. So yeah, check that out.
Awesome. Okay. And as for me, check out the free 7-day trial membership at cryptogoldcentral.com or sign up for a full year for just $225 or contact me at ahoffman@cryptogoldcentral.com. Thanks very much and have a great crypto day.
Thanks, Andy.